Tajweed is broken up into two portions. The first being Makharijul Huruf, which is the actual pronunciation of the letters, where in the mouth the pronunciation of each letter comes from. Right, so Makharijul Huruf is focusing more on the pronunciation. There are 17 pronunciations in Arabic. In this video series, I've joined three of them together, so we only have 15, right? But typically, in all the other Tajweed books, they have all 17 makharij. So you should learn, if you are already a Hafid and you are focusing now on bettering your Tajweed and furthering your knowledge of Tajweed, you learn it as 17. I've just consolidated it for ease of access for those who are not Hafid and for those who don't understand how to read Arabic as yet. The second part is Sifat, right? So there's one part which is Makharijul Huruf, which is pronunciation of the actual letters, and the second part is Sifat, right? Most people who are able to read the Quran are aware of Makharijul Huruf but not aware of Sifat, right? So what Sifat is are qualities of letters. The direct translation of Sifat means a quality. A quality of a letter, which means how is the letter pronounced, right? So this is referring to where is the letter pronounced from, right? And this is referring to the how is it pronounced, right? So either it's stretched or it's read abruptly, or you'll produce the sound with airflow or the lack of airflow and things like that, right? So these are qualities of letters. Now sifat itself is broken up into two parts. You get sifat lazima and sifat arida. So there are a few sifat that fall under the category of lazima, and we can refer to them as permanent qualities. Okay, now sifat arida are those sifat or characteristics of letters that apply only when the letter is under certain conditions, right? So for example, a qalqala, only when the letter of qalqala has a sakin on it will you make qalqala, right? So only under certain conditions will we apply the sifat. So this is a temporary sifat. Temporary sifat. Okay, now it may be worth noting that there are a lot more aspects of tajweed besides makharij al-huruf and sifat, right? But for this video series, I'm only focusing on these two because these are the most important. It is compulsory upon you to recite the Quran with the appropriate tajweed, meaning makharij al-huruf and sifat, right? At the very least, everybody should know makharij al-huruf and sifat. One more thing to note, Arabic letters and English letters are different because they are different languages. Surprise, surprise. Right? The reason why I mention this is because a lot of the time certain letters in Arabic may sound similar to certain letters in English, but the pronunciation, the place of articulation of these letters are completely different, right? So take lam in Arabic and compare it to the L in English, right? And then take the ta in Arabic and compare it to the T in English. Okay, if you look at these letters here, and for those of you that know the letters already, the lam and the L is very often they compare to each other because the sound is relatively similar, right? But and the lam in Arabic is pronounced from the alveolar ridge, okay, and the T in English is pronounced from the alveolar ridge, while the ta in Arabic is pronounced from behind the T. So these two actually have the same pronunciations, and these two have the same pronunciations, although the sound that comes out between these two are similar, right? So very important, treat Arabic as a completely new language with completely new pronunciations. Try and relearn these pronunciations instead of comparing them to the English ones and then learning them. There are 29 letters in the Arabic alphabet, and I have all of them written below. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with the letters of the alphabet, you guys can watch the slide. For those of you who are familiar, you can skip the slide if you want to. So this slide is basically just teaching you the basics of how to pronounce the letters, how the letters sound, not necessarily where specifically in the mouth you're supposed to put your tongue and those kind of things, but it's just for you to get a general idea of what each letter sounds like. Okay, so we're starting out from the right. In Arabic we always go right to left, right? In English it's the opposite way, so we're going right to left, top to bottom. So the first letter here, this is alif, right? So alif, it looks like a straight line like this here, and this is the transliteration alif. The second one is ba, right? So this is how ba looks. Ba can also look like this here when it's joining to another letter, okay? And it can also look like this here when it's joining to an alif. Okay, so this is ba, very similar to the sound that a sheep makes. And the third one, we've got ta, right? So ta, it looks like this here, like a smiley face, okay? And it can also look like this. This is a shortened form when it's joining to another letter. So when you have these letters in the start of a word, remember Arabic is a morphological language, so you can join things together and change the forms of the letters within a word. So when you have a ta as the first letter of a word, it will change to look like this. So this is your ta. The next one we have here is a tha, right? It makes a sound similar to the th in the word teeth, right? So when you say the word teeth, it's a th, a light th. So that is the sound that we're making with tha. Okay, so we've got tha, which has 3 dots, right? Not to be confused with ta. And then again, when it's in the start of a word, it looks like this here. Also, when ta is joining to an alif, it looks like this. And when tha is joining to an alif, it also looks very similar, right? So not to be confused, ta and tha. The next letter we've got, these three, you can see they look relatively similar, right? So the positioning of the dot or lack thereof in these three letters is what's going to enable us to distinguish between these three. So the next letter we've got is Jim, right? Jim. Now, very important, it sounds like a J, right, in English, but the pronunciation of J and the pronunciation of Jim is completely different, right? You may or may not be able to hear it as I've said it, but bear in mind that these pronunciations are different. We only use the transliteration to assist us in the sounding of the letters, right? Not the makharij of the letters. Okay, and a jim can also look like this here if it's in the start of a letter, start of a word rather, right, with a dot at the bottom. And if another letter joins to it, say for example you've got a ba joining to a jim, then the jim at the end of that word will look like this here, and there's our dot, right? The next letter within this three similar letters category is ha, right? This is a throaty kind of light H sound, right? So it's a ha. So we pronounce it from the middle of the throat. We'll do that pronunciation a bit later. This is the transliteration, and this is how it looks. Of course, it takes the same shape, the same form as jim in the start of a letter, and similar at the end of a letter as well, right? And the next one is ha, right? So it's a top of the throat sound. There is no tongue involvement in this particular letter, right? So there isn't a kha, like a gargling sound. You must remove the tongue involvement, which is a very common thing that I've noticed amongst the huffaz that have just completed. There's a lot of tongue involvement in the letter ha, right? So you need to remove that tongue involvement. So it's the transliteration kh makes it seem like you need to put your tongue in the pronunciation of this letter, but like I said, the transliteration is only for the benefit of those who haven't been exposed to the letters before, and just for them to get a general idea of it. So this is how the letter looks, and this is how the letter will look in the start of a word with a dot on the top, right? So make note, dot at the bottom, jim, no dot is ha, and dot at the top is ha. The next letter we have here is dal, right? Dal, like dal in rice. So this is how it looks, and it will always look like this here. There's no joining form of this letter, right? So if it's at the start of the word, they'll just put it like this here separately from the rest of the word. If it's at the end, they'll put it like this separately at the end of the word, right? Very important though, not to be confused with the D in English, because the D in English is pronounced from the alveolar ridge, while the dal in Arabic is pronounced from the top two teeth. The next letter we have is dhal, right? So the th in the word the, right? The heavy th is very similar to the pronunciation of dhal, right? So this is how we're gonna write it, with the th as a transliteration, dhal, and you can hear the vibration as I'm saying it, the dhal, okay? And not to be confused with dal, obviously the addition of the dot on the top, right? That's how we distinguish the two. The next two letters, also one with a dot, one without. So the first one is ra. The ra in Arabic and the r in English, different pronunciations, right? Then again, there's a lot of different forms of the letter r in English. Some people pronounce it as a hard r, like how most South Africans do, and if you have a bit more of a Western accent, you'll pronounce it with a softened r, right? So you say r like that, okay? But it's very different to the actual letter ra in Arabic. So we're going to use a r as a transliteration. This is how it looks. And the next letter, the one with the addition of the dot to this one, is za, right? So it's a Z sound in English. So you've got za. After za, we have the next letter, which is sin. Okay, so sin, similar to the letter S in English. Then we have sheen. Okay, so it's a SH sound. Sheen, which is a scene with 3 dots on top. Next to that, we have sword, right? So the pronunciation of scene and the pronunciation of sword is a bit similar. The difference is that sword is what we call a full mouth letter. We'll do full mouth letters in due course. And scene is an empty mouth version of this letter, right? So you've got sword. You may also liken this letter to the word sword in English, right? Just to give yourself an idea of how it's pronounced. So this is what your sword looks like. And then again, when your scene is in the start of a word and it joins to another letter, this is how it's going to look, right? So you can join a scene to, for example, you join it to a ba, and this is how it will look. A sheen, you join to a ba as well. It will look very similar, just with the 3 dots on top, right? So it shortens, it takes away this curly part of the letter when you put it in the start. When you put it at the end, it looks like this here, normal. And a sword, if it's in the start of a word, this is how it will look, right? So it gets shortened again. This curly part of the sword gets taken out, and a way you can remember it is that this kind of looks like a sword, the curved swords that the pirates use, right? Here's your handle, inside here's your curved blade, so you can remember it in that way. The next letter we've got is Lord. Lord, right? So Lord, very difficult to find a similar letter in English, right? Because there's no pronunciation in English that can correlate with the pronunciation of Lord in Arabic, right? So we're just going to use a D and a H, right? And this DH is to show that it's full mouth, right? So it's Lord, and this is how the letter looks. And in the start, it looks the same way sword changes by removing this part here when it goes into your first letter of the word. Lord is the same, just you have a dot on top. The next letter we've got is To, and To is the full mouth version of the letter Ta, right? So we're gonna say To. We're just gonna put like a little bit of a line on the T to show that it's a full mouth letter, right? So this is how your To looks, and when it joins to another letter, it just joins like this here, right? So the next letter afterwards, for example, if it's a Ba, it will look like that. The next letter after that is Vo. Vo and Dhal are similar in their pronunciations. The only difference is that this one is flat and this one is full. Alright, so here's your full one, here's your flat one, and there's a lot of letters that are similar in this regard. One is flat, one is full, and the difference will be explained in due course, right? So Vo, which is a full mouth letter, this is how it looks, and when it joins to something, then again the same way. To, when it joins to something, stays the same. Vo as well stays the same when it joins to something. The next letter is sometimes difficult for non-Arabic speakers to pronounce, right? Ain, it's a throaty sound, like a pure throat sound. Your ain is a pure throat sound, right? So AIN is what I'm going to use as a transliteration, and this is how our letter looks, like a upside down 3. And when it joins to something, when it's in the start of a word, it will look like this here, right? So we say we're joining to a Ba. This is how it's going to look. So it's going to be the top half only, right? And then the rest of it is just going to join into the next letter. The next letter we've got is Ghoin. So Ghoin, which is also a throat letter, looks very similar to Ain. The only difference is the dot on the top, and when it starts in a letter, it will start looking like this here. And then we have our last row. The first letter in the last row is Fa, which is similar to a F in English. So we've got Fa. This is how the letter in its raw form will look. And when it's in the start, it will just be a little bit shorter than it, right? So you're joining to a Ba, for example. That's how it will look. And when it's in between two words, so say we're joining one Ba, one Fa, and another Ba, this is how it's going to look, right? So it will be rounded in the center between two letters if you're joining it and if it's in the middle. The next letter is qaf, right? So we're going to use a Q in the transliteration. Qaf. This is how the letter looks, and this is how the letter looks in the start of a word. So it doesn't have that whole curly part to it in the start of the word. And similar to fa, when it's in the center of a word, it will look like this here with a rounded circle in the middle of two letters, and it's got two dots on top of it instead of one. Last few now. Next up we have kaf. Kaf is usually associated with a K in English, right? I'm not going to do this. I don't want you guys to remember it as a K because the pronunciation of K is different from that to kaf, right? So we need to remember it as a curly C in English, right? So the word kaf, like this here, baby cow, or that thing at the back of your leg. This is what we're going to use as a transliteration for kaf, particularly because the pronunciation of kaf in Arabic is closer to the pronunciation of a light curly C in English than it is to a K in English, right? So kaf, and this is how it looks. It can also look like this here in the start of a word. The next one we have is lam, right? So lam, similar to a L in English. So this is how our lam looks, not to be confused with an alif, right? An alif, if you have an alif at the end of a word, it's going to look like this here, right? So you can see it comes out of the letter going right to left and then goes up. This lam goes into the next letter from right to left, so it goes downwards. Okay, so if you look at it like an exponential graph, this is a decreasing one, this is an increasing one, for those of you who like maths. The next letter is meme, right? So you've got meme, right? I'm writing it like this because everybody knows what a meme is these days. So a meme can look like this here, or it can look like this, all right? And when a meme is at the start of a word, this is how it's going to look, all right? So when a meme is either at the start or in the middle of a word, it will look like this. But if it's at the end of the word, then it will look like this on its own. Right. The next one we have is noon, similar to an N in English. So we've got noon. Right. This is how it looks. If it's in the start, it will look like this here. And if it's in between two words, right, if it's joining, it will look like this. So we say we have a ba, and then a noon, and then another ba. So here's your two bars in the start at the end, and a noon will look like this, right? So it's a slight bump and it goes back, and then you've got your one dot on the top. So that's how a noon in the center of two letters looks. The last few now we've got wow, right? Which is wow, like an exclamation wow in English, right? So when you round your lips and then open them and then round them again, wow, that's how it's pronounced. It looks like this at all times, whether it's in the start, in the middle, or at the end of a word. The next letter we have is ha, which is a heavy ha that comes from the bottom of the throat closest to the chest, not to be confused with the light ha that comes from the middle of the throat closer towards the mouth, right? So this is the heavy ha. In this ha has three forms. The first form is this form here, all right? In the Quran it's written like this, so it's like the cancer awareness symbol but just flipped around. And another form of the letter is this here, kind of looks like a nose. And then the last form of the letter is this here, right? So when you have a ha at the end of a word, it can either look like this or like this here, right? And when you have a ha in the starting of a word, most often it looks like this. You also get the half butterfly version of the letter ha, right? So something that looks like this here. Okay, that is another form. There's a few different forms, and we'll go through them in due course, but for now just get used to seeing this particular ha and this one here that looks like a nose. The second last letter is your hamza. Your hamza comes from the same place as your ha does, right? Now, in actual Arabic, a hamza makes the sound of an alif. So if you have an alif just like this here, it doesn't make a sound. Usually an alif, what it's used for is for open letters, right? For madda. So if you have a hamza on top of a alif, then this will make a alif sound a, right? But a hamza at the end of, say, a mad, for example. So if you have sha'a, like this, right? So this is for obviously those people who are familiar with Arabic. If you have sha and you're stopping on this hamza, then you'll pronounce it from the place where you pronounce ha. So sha, that is how it's pronounced. So sha, and then you'll cut off the sound from the bottom of the throat. The last letter is ya, which is similar to a Y in English, and this is how it looks. Sometimes it's got two dots at the bottom. When it's in the start of a word, it looks like this here. Okay, when it's at the end of the word, it's in its raw form. Now that we've relatively learned to Okay, so now that we've familiarized ourselves with the sounds of the 29 letters, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say all of the letters, and it's important for you to remember all the letters, preferably in order, right? So I'm going to say all the letters, and then you can pause the video and say it after me and try and learn the Arabic alphabet, right? So we've got Alif, Ba, Ta, Tha, Jim, Ha, Kha, Dal, Zal, Ra, زا سين شين صاد ضاد طا ظا عين غين فا قاف كاف لام ميم نون واو ها همزة and ya.